What if the rules meant to protect you were never meant to save you? When Sam Miller accepts a mysterious job as caretaker of Kilgore Court, he's handed a list of strict, bizarre rules. Don't look at the gardener. Always knock before entering. Never accept the first delivery. But as the days stretch on, Sam discovers the truth. The house isn't haunted. It's alive. Beneath its grand halls and endless corridors lies a monstrous secret that feeds on broken rules and desperate bargains. And when his sister visits, one wrong move triggers a horrifying chain of events that no rulebook can contain. Don't look at the gardener. Those words circled my mind as the bus rumbled down the narrow road, cutting through dense woods, each turn taking me deeper into nowhere. The tire screeched as the driver made a final sharp turn, revealing the towering iron gates of Kilgore Court. Black vines snaked up the stone pillars, and behind them stood the mansion, tall and pale like a corpse under moonlight. I stepped off the bus with my single duffel bag, the weight of the printed rules in my jacket pocket heavier than anything I was carrying. Pim Piran was already waiting at the gate, standing motionless, as if he'd been there for hours. His stature was slight, almost fragile, but the brightly colored bird mask covering his face made him appear unnatural, almost theatrical, a strange cross between a carnival performer and something out of a nightmare. "Good morning, Sam Miller," he greeted, extending a pale, wrinkled hand. "Your file says you're particularly adept at following instructions to the letter. That is exactly what we need here." "Yes, sir," I replied, shaking his hand. My voice came out tighter than I intended. "I'm very detail-oriented. Some had called me obsessive, others a machine, always following the rules, always staying within the lines. It was both my greatest flaw and, apparently, my strongest qualification for this job." Pim gestured toward the gate as it creaked open behind him. "Excellent. That is the only way one survives here." The path twisted through the overgrown estate grounds. Perfectly trimmed hedges, shaped like animals, lined the cobblestone walkway, their eyes hollow and lifeless. My nose twitched at a faint odor of something rotten drifting through the air. "Oak smell," I muttered. Pim barely glanced over. "The carrion blooms, a rare flower in our conservatory. They thrive here." As we walked, I studied the house. The Kilgore Court mansion was every bit the Gothic nightmare I expected. Pointed arches, black wrought iron balconies, steep gables, and massive stained glass windows, many of which were either cracked or fully boarded shut. We entered through a tall oak door into the grand foyer. A dozen massive statues lined the hall, each draped entirely in thick gray fabric. My eyes lingered on one of them, the fabric shifting ever so slightly, though no wind touched the air. "You must ensure," Pim said sharply, noticing my glance, "that these coverings stay fully intact at all times. If any should become exposed." He didn't finish this sentence. I swallowed. "Understood." He led me deeper into the mansion, explaining the routine as we walked. I was to wind the grandfather clock every morning, always check the statues, always knock before entering any closed door, never answer the first delivery attempt, only the second, and most importantly, his voice lowered, never look at the gardener. "Why?" The question slipped out. "Because if you see him, you may not remain yourself much longer," Pim replied. "His temperament is volatile." We reached the staff changing room where dozens of masks hung neatly along the walls, each one identical to Pim's except pristine and new. He handed one to me. "You are to wear this at all times outside your private quarters," he said. "Here, the mask isn't simply tradition, it is protection." I took it with trembling fingers. The soft feathers brushed my palms. I hesitated for a moment before securing it over my face. The world narrowed instantly. My peripheral vision cut down to narrow slits, forcing my focus forward. I felt trapped already. As he continued to give me a tour, Pim displayed an almost unnatural calmness, as if this twisted estate was perfectly normal. We passed through corridors filled with ancient oil paintings, most signed by one name, Pim Piran. "The first Pim," he said, noticing my gaze. "The name is passed down, a tradition. The original was the one who designed most of these guidelines." His voice softened, almost reverent. One particular painting caught my attention. A grotesque figure stitched from several mismatched body parts, its face partially sewn, as if in mid-creation. I felt my stomach twist. Art was his release, Pym whispered behind me. The rules, however, were his true legacy. We finally reached my quarters. A set of rooms larger than my entire apartment back home, a private study, a fully stocked kitchen, and even a small library. Most of the books appearing to be personal journals or hand-bound logs from past caretakers. "This will be your space," Pym said. "You may remove your mask here, but only here." He removed his own mask for the first time. His face was thin, unnaturally pale and sunken, as if stretched too tight over the bone. Scars traced faint lines along his jaw, hidden expertly beneath his mask while he wore it. I pretended not to notice. My fingers twitched to adjust my own mask instinctively, even though it was finally safe to remove it. "Remember," Pym continued, his tone growing serious, "the rules exist to keep the court in balance. Disobedience invites consequences." I nodded, committing every word to memory. That's what I did, followed the rules. Yet even then, some corner of my mind whispered a warning I didn't yet understand. Not every door should be opened. Night came early at Kilgore Court. By 7, the sky had bled into an oppressive shade of black, and the only light came from dim wall sconces and the warm, flickering fireplace in my private study. The silence was thick, broken only by the occasional creak of old wood settling, or distant clicks as the mansion breathed through its ancient bones. I sat at the desk, staring at the list of rules again. 8 of them, each printed in a sharp, almost militant font, nailed inside a glass frame on the wall. Rule 1 haunted me the most. Never look at the gardener. Pym never fully explained what the gardener was. Man? A creature? Both? My brain kept trying to assign something logical, but nothing fit. There was something primal, ancient about that rule. Like an instinct you couldn't quite explain but felt in your gut. I rubbed my temples, exhaling slowly. This was temporary, I reminded myself, just 3 weeks. Easy money. Stay inside the lines, do the job, go home. A sudden knock at the door made me jump. 3 sharp, evenly spaced taps. I glanced at the clock. 10:02 p.m. Pym had said I wouldn't be disturbed tonight. I stood cautiously and approached the door. Another knock. This time lighter, almost hesitant. When I opened it, no one was there. Only the corridor stretching off into dimness. My breath fogged in the cold draft rolling through. It was likely nothing, I told myself. Old houses made noise. Maybe the wind. But I couldn't ignore the chill in my stomach, the faint sense that I was being watched. I shut the door and locked it. The rest of the night passed in restless wakefulness. My first shift began at dawn. The next morning, I awoke before sunrise. My mind buzzed with uneasy energy as I donned my uniform and mask, moving with mechanical precision. Following Pym's earlier instructions, I made my first stop at the grandfather clock. The tall beast stood in the main hall, its pendulum swaying gently in rhythmic arcs. The air around it was strangely heavy, almost charged. I wound it exactly as I was told, 7 full turns, then checked the minute hand, precisely 6:00 a.m. The ticking immediately grew louder, almost like faint, distant bells echoing from unseen corridors. I felt the vibration hum against my fingertips. Done. Next were the statues. I moved through the great hall slowly, checking each one. The thick gray sheets remained firmly in place, but it was impossible not to feel that something underneath shifted slightly as I passed, like something breathing beneath the fabric. I finished my inspection without incident, until I reached the 6th statue. The covering had slipped. Only slightly, just a few inches, but enough for pale marble fingers to peek from beneath the cloth. Smooth, impossibly detailed fingers that were disturbingly lifelike. My chest tightened. My first instinct was to step back, but Rule 5 rang sharp in my head. All statues must remain fully covered. I forced my shaking hands forward, carefully pulling the heavy cloth back over the exposed hand, smoothing it tight. The moment the fingers vanished beneath the fabric again, the air around me seemed to exhale. My pulse gradually slowed. No harm done. The rule was obeyed. The statue wouldn't move again, hopefully. I continued my rounds, pretending not to feel the dozens of covered eyes tracking me through the silence. Later that afternoon, Pim reappeared. His arrival was always sudden, almost like the house allowed him to manifest out of nowhere. "You're adapting well, Sam," he said through his mask. "Thank you, sir," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. Pim led me outside for further orientation, a rare break into daylight. The gardens were vast, winding like an elaborate maze of hedges, topiary, and stone arches. The air smelled faintly sweet, but always undercut by the same rotting stench I'd noticed upon arrival. "The carrion blooms flourish here," Pim said as we passed a patch of grotesque, crimson-petaled flowers. "They pulse subtly with the breeze, releasing their stomach-turning aroma. Their scent wards off certain presences." I nodded, though nausea curled in my gut. We moved toward the greenhouse, an enormous glass structure at the estate's rear. Inside, exotic plants twisted up iron lattices, many of them unfamiliar even to my curious eye. Pim suddenly froze mid-step and without warning seized my forearm in a vice grip. I followed his gaze, instinctively, only to have him jerk my face forward. "Rule 1, he hissed sharply into my ear. "Eyes forward, do not look." Peripheral vision offered me a glimpse, a shape standing among the hedges not far from us, a towering, swaying figure, not walking but almost, undulating. The gardener. Even without seeing him fully, something inside me recoiled in terror. My instinct screamed to run, but Pim's grip held me firm. We stood frozen for several breathless seconds, the thing lurking at the edge of sight. Then it was gone, slipping back into the foliage like fog retreating before dawn. Only once it vanished did Pim release my arm. "Forgive me," he said softly. It's rare for him to be this active so early. I exhaled a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. My legs trembled beneath me. "Just practice not reacting," Pim continued. "Soon it will become instinct, and you'll be safe." I swallowed dryly, unsure if I could ever fully obey Rule 1 when the time truly came. That night, I sat again at my desk, trying to decompress. The carrion bloom stench still clung faintly to my jacket. My hand shook as I scribbled notes in the journal Pim had provided. Part personal record, part logbook for my duties. I reviewed the rules again, my mind circling the same dreadful questions I was too afraid to voice. What was this house? What was that thing in the garden? And what price had others paid before me? As midnight approached, the house groaned and creaked again. Wind whistled past the ancient windows. My stomach twisted when I heard something new. A soft whisper, barely audible, coming from beneath the floorboards. I leaned closer, my skin crawling. The whisper repeated, slower this time. "Not every door should be opened." The doorbell rang. 3 sharp chimes cut through the heavy silence of Kilgore Court, making me jolt upright at my desk. I glanced at the clock. 9:15, exactly as Pim had said. Deliveries would begin. I froze, pulse quickening. The rules drilled into my mind like a second heartbeat. Rule 7. Do not answer the first delivery attempt. From my window, I could just make out the delivery van idling by the gate, its engine humming softly. A man in a brown uniform stood at the doorstep, clipboard in hand, peering up at the tall windows, as if hoping to spot movement behind the curtains. I stayed absolutely still. The man waited a few more moments before ringing the bell again. 3 more chimes, each one made my stomach knot tighter. Finally, he returned to his van and drove away. I exhaled, barely realizing I had been holding my breath. The first attempt had passed. Now came the waiting game. Pim's voice echoed in my memory. Only accept the second attempt, never the first, never the third. The house returned to its quiet breathing. I tried to distract myself with chores. I wound the grandfather clock as usual, inspected the statue covers, thankfully undisturbed, and reviewed the property log. But the stillness gnawed at me. My mind kept circling back to that delivery van. The man, the package that waited somewhere outside. Hours crawled by until the second knock came, just past noon. 3 knocks again, identical, patient, deliberate. Following procedure, I approached the door. Through the small peephole, I recognized the same delivery man. This time, though, he looked slightly disheveled. His hair was ruffled, face flushed, as if the hours of waiting had drained him. He knocked once more, then noticed my silhouette behind the frosted glass. "Sorry," he called out, his voice oddly casual. "I've been trying to drop this off all morning. Weird system you folks got here." I hesitated, but forced myself to follow protocol. Slowly, I opened the heavy door just wide enough to slide my body through. "Delivery for Kilgore Court?" I asked. "Yeah." He gave me a tired smile. "1 box. Real heavy, too." He motioned to the square white package at his feet. It was larger than I expected, roughly the size of a small suitcase, and sealed with thick, industrial-grade tape. The surface was entirely blank, save for a handwritten label. "For collection. Second attempt." Something about the wording made my skin crawl. I reached down to lift it, and immediately regretted it. The box was heavier than its size suggested, densely packed and strangely warm to the touch. A faint, sickly odor leaked from somewhere within the sealed cardboard, sour and metallic, like spoiled meat left too long in summer heat. The man shifted awkwardly. Listen, before I head out, could I, maybe use your bathroom real quick? Been driving all morning." His voice was polite, but slightly off, too eager. I froze, mind racing back through the rules. No mention of delivery personnel entering the premises. But this wasn't exactly breaking protocol, and refusing him might risk more attention than necessary. "1 moment," I replied, forcing calm into my voice. I led him around the corner to the guest restroom near the foyer, but not before opening the storage closet nearby. Inside, a rack of guest masks hung in neat rows. I pulled one, a bright crimson design shaped like a goat's head, and handed it to him. "You'll need to wear this," I said. He chuckled nervously, flipping the mask around in his hands. "What, is there a masquerade party going on or something?" "House rule." Reluctantly, he slipped it over his face before stepping into the bathroom. I stood rigid outside, gripping the package tight against my chest. My stomach twisted with every splash of water and clink of porcelain echoing from inside. Finally, the toilet flushed. He emerged moments later, adjusting the mask as he stepped out. "Nice place you got here," he said lightly, though his voice trembled behind the goat's snout. Without further words, I ushered him back toward the main entrance. As the door closed behind him, I watched his van disappear down the winding driveway until it was fully swallowed by the trees. The estate fell silent again. I exhaled. My hands trembled. The package pulsed with warmth against my palms. I carried it carefully outside toward the maze garden, toward the center where Pim had shown me on my first day. The sickly, sweet stench grew stronger the closer I approached the heart of the labyrinth. Flowers swayed along the narrow path, those same crimson carrion blooms releasing their corpse-like perfume as if in greeting. After several winding turns, I reached the stone pedestal at the maze's core. A single iron plate lay embedded in its surface, marked simply, "Deliveries." I placed the package on top, heart hammering. The breeze shifted suddenly, blowing the carrion blooms into frenzied motion. For a moment, I thought I heard a soft groan emanate from within the box. So faint, I almost dismissed it as imagination. I checked my watch. 4 minutes, 37 seconds. Plenty of time. Following Pim's strict instruction, I turned and retraced my steps out of the maze. My pace quickened with every turn, trying to stay ahead of the rising anxiety curling around my spine. 5 minutes exactly, I reached the mansion's back door and slammed it shut behind me, locking the deadbolt. My breathing came in short, shallow bursts. The box was gone. The house remained eerily still. And somewhere in the back of my mind, a question gnawed like teeth on bone. What exactly had I just delivered? Night fell like a suffocating blanket over Kilgore Court. I couldn't sleep, even as the old mansion groaned and sighed with the weight of its own history. My mind kept circling the same question. What was inside that box? Why did it feel warm? Why did it seem to move? I sat in my private study, the dim glow of the desk lamp casting long shadows across the room. The logbook lay open before me, my pen idle above the page. The rules stared back at me from the opposite wall, framed in glass like commandments handed down by some twisted god. "The first package is not for you." Pym's words returned again, quietly gnawing at my thoughts. He had always been deliberate about the rules, strict but calm, like someone who had seen too many things to allow any deviations. I reached into the bottom drawer and pulled out the old journal I'd discovered earlier that week. One of the former caretakers, a previous Pym, had left behind pages full of scrawled notes, many half-burned or scratched out. Most were nonsensical rambles, but here and there were fragments that clung like burrs to my mind. "We don't protect the world from the house," one line read. "We protect the house from the world." I turned the page carefully. Another entry, written in jagged strokes. "The collector comes for the first knock. Only the fool answers." I rubbed my face, my breath shaky behind my mask. It had been my first full day on duty, and already the lines between job and nightmare were thinning. The house pulsed with an energy I couldn't explain, something ancient and hungry that seeped into the walls like rot. A soft chime broke the silence, the grandfather clock. I glanced up. Midnight. The heavy pendulum ticked like a metronome measuring out my sanity. I rose and walked toward the camera monitors Pym had shown me during my initial training. A small bank of screens feeding live footage from different angles of the property. At first, everything appeared still. The driveway, empty. The grand foyer, silent. The conservatory, only the gentle sway of the carrion blooms in their glass prison. And then, on screen, the front porch. Movement. I leaned forward. The delivery man, the same man, he was back. Except he shouldn't have been. He stood perfectly still under the porch light, his clipboard gone, his hands slack at his sides, his head tilted ever so slightly, as though listening to something whispering just beyond the camera's range. The goat mask I had given him earlier hung loosely from his neck. Panic prickled along my spine. He shouldn't be here. He had already left. The van was gone. I reached for the intercom but stopped myself. What was I even supposed to say? What if this wasn't real? My chest tightened. The man slowly raised his right hand and began tapping his temple rhythmically with one finger. Tap, tap, tap. Each movement perfectly timed with the ticking of the grandfather clock. I wanted to turn away, but I couldn't. Without warning, his head snapped backward violently, as if yanked by an unseen hand. His body convulsed, his legs bending unnaturally before collapsing onto the porch in a heap. His arms flailed like a puppet cut loose from its strings, but what chilled me most was his face, or what remained of it. Through the low-res camera feed, I could just barely make out the glint of metal. The key. The delivery man had somehow pulled the master key, my master key, from his pocket and was now pressing it firmly into his own eye socket, again and again, pushing, twisting, forcing. Blood sprayed across the porch light's glass, and his body spasmed violently, the key still buried deep in the mutilated ruin of his face. I slammed my hand over my mouth to muffle the scream crawling up my throat. It wasn't possible. I staggered back from the monitor, trembling. My breath came in ragged gasps, eyes wide and unblinking. My body didn't feel like my own anymore. My legs refused to move. The image on the screen flickered, static, and then nothing. He was gone. The porch stood empty again. I stumbled toward the window, pulling aside the thick velvet curtain, desperate for confirmation. The driveway beyond was barren. No van, no body, not even a blood stain. Had it even happened? The house moaned again, its walls vibrating faintly with the low hum of ticking gears somewhere deep within. I flinched as my phone buzzed against the desk. My heart skipped. The screen displayed a single message: "Stay inside." No number, no contact, just the words. I stared, the device trembling in my hand. Pim. It had to be him, but how? He never used phones. Everything in this house was designed to be cut off, isolated. We weren't even supposed to have functioning service out here. Yet somehow, his voice had found me again, mechanical and cold, just like his warnings. Stay inside. I locked every door, every window, every latch and bolt and chain. I sat through the night, wide-eyed, muscles locked in place. At one point, I thought I heard footsteps pacing the hallway outside my room. Slow, heavy, deliberate. They paused often, as if whoever, or whatever, was standing just beyond the threshold, listening to the sound of my breath. But I never opened the door. By morning, only silence remained. The morning light did little to break the fog inside my head. I hadn't slept. My legs felt like hollow steel rods as I moved through my duties, winding the grandfather clock, checking the statue coverings, pacing the endless, echoing hallways of Kilgore Court like some pale imitation of a caretaker. The rules kept me breathing. That was all. Do not answer the first knock. Do not look at the gardener. Do not linger in the maze. The list cycled through my brain like a desperate mantra, but last night had cracked something inside me. The delivery man, what I saw on the monitor, what he did to himself with my key, none of it could be rationalized away. But in the morning, there was no blood on the porch, no sign of anyone outside. Even the master key had somehow reappeared on the hook beside my study door, as though untouched. Had I imagined everything? The thought was almost worse than the alternative. I found Pim in the Eastern Conservatory, calmly pruning one of the carrion bloom vines. The rotten sweetness of their scent filled my lungs and nearly made me gag. "Good morning, Sam," Pim greeted, not looking up. I didn't answer immediately, my fingers curled into fists at my sides. Finally, I said, "I need to know what happened last night." The pruning shears clicked sharply as he snipped off a wide red petal. "What exactly do you believe happened?" "There was a man, the delivery driver. He came back after the second attempt. I saw him," my voice cracked, breath catching. "I saw him mutilate himself. With the key." Pim finally glanced at me, his expression unreadable beneath the mask. "And yet, there is no body, no blood, no evidence. That doesn't mean it didn't happen." He sighed, almost with pity. "Sam, you must understand this house distorts perception. It plays tricks. Reality here softens." I shook my head. "I know what I saw. Did you?" His voice remained calm, but his words pierced. "Or is your mind trying to rationalize what it cannot process? You're not the first to witness phantoms that never existed." I wanted to scream at him, to shake him, but I couldn't. My composure held by the same brittle thread that kept me functioning inside these walls. Instead, I said quietly, "What happens if the rules are broken?" He paused, considering. "Some rules exist to maintain balance. Others exist to maintain the illusion of safety." "That's not an answer." He tilted his head. "Because you are not yet prepared for the answer." He turned back to the carrion blooms, dismissing me as if nothing more needed to be said. Hours later, still haunted by Pim's evasion, I found myself drawn to the study once more. The journal lay where I had left it, open to its most cryptic passages. "The maze feeds it. The house is its skin. The first collector wears your face before you even see it. The gardener is not the worst thing here." I read the entries over and over until the words blurred. None of it made sense, yet I felt their meaning lurking just outside my comprehension. Like some enormous shape beneath murky water, too large to perceive fully. The air grew heavy, thick. Then I heard it, a faint scratching. My head snapped up. The sound came from behind the study's bookshelf, a wall that as far as I knew, was solid stone. The scratching continued, faint, deliberate, as if long fingernails traced lazy circles along the stone. I stepped closer, pulse pounding, ears straining for any detail. The scratching stopped. Silence. I waited. Then, a voice. Soft, female, familiar. "Sam?" I stumbled back, my breath hitching. It was Elena, my sister's voice. Impossible. She wasn't here. She had never been here. She didn't even know the address to Kilgore Court, but it was her exact voice, calling from behind a wall that should not have allowed any sound to pass through. "Elena?" My voice cracked, brittle with disbelief. Silence again, then faint sobbing. "Please, Sam. I don't know where I am. It's dark." My throat dried as icy sweat trickled down my spine. No, this isn't real. You can't be here." I turned in circles, searching for a rational explanation. The house was playing tricks. Pim had warned me about distortions. This had to be part of it. Hallucinations. But the sobbing continued, growing more desperate. "I need you." The words cut into my chest like hooks. I backed away from the shelf, forcing myself to turn toward the hallway. Run! I needed to get away from this room, from this voice. I reached the hallway door, but froze. A shape stood at the far end of the hall, tall, motionless. The gardener. Even from this distance, I could feel its presence. My stomach clenched. My throat closed. "Don't look." My eyes darted to the floor, staring at the old wooden planks beneath my feet. Peripheral vision blurred him into a dark smear at the edge of reality. The scratching resumed behind me, faster now, frantic. "Sam! Don't leave me!" My pulse thundered in my ears. My breath came in short, panicked bursts. I forced myself to inch sideways along the hallway wall, head bowed, eyes down. The gardener remained still. I didn't dare look up. The door to my quarters loomed just ahead. Safety, sanctuary. My fingers trembled as I reached for the handle. Behind me, the scratching suddenly ceased. The hallway grew unnervingly silent, and then I heard it again. Her voice, but now distorted, lower, twisted. "You broke the rules, Sam." The door burst open beneath my shaking grip, and I slipped inside, slamming it shut, heart pounding wildly. I didn't sleep that night either. The next morning, the house was too quiet. It wasn't the usual heavy stillness of Kilgore Court. It was a vacuum, like something had been drained from the air overnight, leaving a hollow emptiness behind. The grandfather clock still ticked its metronomic beat, but even that seemed muted, as though the house itself was holding its breath. I moved through my duties on autopilot. The rules, my anchor, kept me functioning. Wind a clock, check the statues, avoid the gardener, breathe. But Elena's voice still echoed in my skull, replaying like a broken record, pulling me deeper into doubt. I knew she couldn't be here, yet I had heard her, clear, desperate. What was real anymore? I finished my rounds and returned to the study, hoping for some measure of grounding in the journal left by the first Pim. The cryptic scrawls offered little comfort, only more riddles. It learns through memory. It speaks with familiar voices. The house reshapes for those who stay too long. I gritted my teeth. This wasn't madness. Something inside this place was actively twisting reality, using familiarity as a lure. But to what end? Was it hunting me? Testing me? I turned suddenly toward the far corner of the study, where an antique mirror stood, one I had largely ignored until now. It was tall, oval-shaped, its frame blackened with age, its surface dusted from years of disuse. But tonight, the glass gleamed oddly, as though recently polished. I stepped closer. At first, my reflection seemed normal. My figure stood there, masked in the ridiculous bird-like beak, the feathers slightly askew from my panicked night, but something was wrong. Subtle at first, but undeniable. The reflection wasn't moving in sync with me. I tilted my head slightly to the left. The reflection delayed, half a second, then followed. I raised my right hand. The reflection lifted the left. Not a mirror, a window. Ice crawled down my spine. I reached out toward the glass, hand trembling. My fingertips hovered just an inch from the cold surface, my breath fogging against it. And then the reflection smiled. I hadn't smiled. Beneath the bird mask, my lips remained pressed into a tight line. But the reflection, my double, smiled with an unnatural curl, as if the skin itself was being tugged upward by invisible hooks. My heart hammered wildly. The smile widened, teeth too large, too white, gleaming like polished porcelain. And then slowly, it reached up with both hands and began to peel the mask off its face. I stepped back instinctively. Its skin beneath the mask wasn't mine. The flesh was pale, almost translucent, threaded with dark veins like fine cracks in marble. The eyes were wrong. Pure white, lidless orbs with pinpoint pupils that seemed to float in liquid. The reflection leaned forward, pressing its hands flat against the other side of the glass, as though testing the strength of its prison. Then it whispered, though no sound should have passed through glass. "I'm waiting, Sam." I stumbled back, nearly tripping over the desk chair. The journal fell to the floor, pages fanning open like a wounded bird. The glass on the mirror began to tremble, vibrating softly, like it was being struck from within. No, not now, not again. I turned on my heel and fled the study, slamming the door behind me and throwing my weight against it, heart racing like a trapped animal. I didn't leave my quarters for the rest of the day. The mansion groaned as usual, but now every creak and shifting floorboard felt deliberate, like the house was aware of my presence. Watching. Waiting. I made tea, desperate for any ritual that might stabilize my mind. Chamomile, ginger. Pim once recommended herbal teas to soften the edges, but there were no edges left anymore, just the growing sense of being trapped inside something alive. The phone rang. I nearly dropped my cup. The ancient rotary phone sat on the side table, covered in a thin layer of dust. It was never supposed to ring. There was no line in or out. And yet, it rang. 3 soft chimes, just like the doorbell. My mouth dried as I approached, staring at the device as though it might bite. Against better judgment, I answered. "Hello?" At first, only static. Then a voice emerged, soft but familiar. "Elena." "Sam, they're lying to you." My breath caught. "Elena, don't trust the masks. Don't trust Pim. Don't trust what you see." Her voice distorted, stretching unnaturally. "I'm here, Sam. Behind the doors they won't let you open. In the room they hide from you." The static swelled, her voice rising with it. "Find me." The line went dead. I stood frozen, the receiver still pressed to my ear long after the signal had vanished. As behind me, the house shifted again, timbers groaning, walls exhaling like lungs. I lowered the phone and whispered into the hollow air, my voice cracking. "What are you?" The lights flickered, and for a moment, I swear, I heard the gardener's slow, wet breathing just beyond my door. The next morning, I made a decision. I could no longer pretend I understood Kilgore Court. I could no longer rely on rules that bent and twisted the moment I obeyed them, and I could no longer pretend that Elena's voice was simply a product of my deteriorating sanity. The house wanted me to obey. Pim wanted me to obey, but obedience wasn't keeping me safe. It was keeping me blind. So today, I would break a rule. The list was clear. Rule 2, only enter rooms after knocking. And yet, the house was full of locked doors that no one had ever explained. Dozens of them. Hallways that seemed to lead nowhere. Rooms that Pim never mentioned. Corridors that shifted length depending on the hour. One door in particular called to me more than the others. The northeast wing, far from my quarters, was rarely part of my round, but I had passed that hallway once during Pim's early tour. At the very end stood a door with no label, its wood darker than the rest, almost black, with an antique brass handle. I waited until late afternoon, after winding the clock, after covering the statues. Then I slipped away. The halls felt different today, the air heavier, like walking through syrup. My footsteps made no sound on the carpeted floor. The house, as always, watched in silence. When I reached the door, my hand trembled. The rules screamed in my mind, knock first. I didn't. I wrapped my fingers around the handle and turned. The door opened with a slow groan, revealing a room far colder than the rest of the mansion. My breath came out in a thin cloud as I stepped inside. This room was not like the others. It was bare stone, unfinished, as though the house itself had been interrupted mid-construction. The walls were uneven, damp, and covered in faint scratch marks. The air smelled of mildew and something metallic underneath, but it was what stood in the center that made my blood turn to ice. A chair. An ordinary wooden chair, except for the thick leather restraints fastened to its arms and legs. Dried stains darkened the seat. Old stains. Blood. The only light came from a single, naked bulb swaying gently from the ceiling. Against the far wall, iron shelves were bolted into the stone, holding rows of glass jars. I stepped closer. Inside each jar floated fragments, bones, teeth. Some held human fingers, perfectly preserved in amber fluid. Others contained eyes, clouded and bloated as if plucked from drowned bodies. My stomach lurched. I nearly retched. This wasn't storage, this was a collection. A low hum began to rise inside my skull, like tinnitus, but growing louder with each breath. Don't trust the masks. Elena's voice rang again in my memory. I turned back toward the door, but stopped. Another door stood on the opposite wall, a smaller one, almost hidden in the shadows. Without hesitation, I crossed the room and reached for the handle. Locked. I knelt to examine it. The keyhole was oddly shaped, jagged, asymmetrical. Suddenly behind me, footsteps. I spun around, heart hammering. Nothing. Just the chair, the jars, the swinging bulb. But I wasn't alone. I could feel it. And then faintly, I heard it. The breathing. Wet, irregular inhalations in and out, somewhere behind the walls. The gardener. I staggered backward from the smaller door, my breath shaking. A soft knock echoed through the room. From inside the wall, 3 knocks, like the doorbell. I stumbled for the exit, nearly losing my balance, slamming the main door shut behind me. My chest heaved as I pressed my back against the cold wood. My pulse slowed. The humming stopped. But as I stood there regaining composure, I noticed something. A small, metallic object on the floor beside my shoe. I bent to pick it up. A key. Rusty, old, jagged teeth matching the peculiar shape of the smaller door's lock. I didn't know how it had appeared, but I knew what it meant. The house was inviting me deeper. I held the key for several minutes before I could even move again. Its rusty surface bit into my skin like tiny teeth. It was heavier than it should have been, cold as bone. The humming inside my head had faded, but not entirely. It pulsed beneath my thoughts like a second heartbeat, steady and patient. The smaller door inside the forbidden room waited. I returned, under the dim light of dusk, when the house's long shadows thickened and the walls whispered in strange groans. The northeast wing always felt distant from the rest of Kilgore Court, but tonight it felt miles away, like I had stepped into another layer of reality entirely. The main door opened without resistance. Inside, the air was even colder than before, and the bulb above the chair now flickered in uneven spasms, casting broken fragments of light across the grotesque jars. I kept my gaze away from them this time. My eyes were drawn instead to the smaller door, sunken into the far wall like a mouth waiting to be fed. I approached it slowly. The key slid in with unsettling ease, like it had been waiting for me. The tumblers inside the old lock clicked one by one in heavy, grinding motions until the final one snapped into place. The door creaked open. A set of stone steps descended sharply into darkness. The smell hit me immediately. Wet earth mixed with old rot. My throat tightened, but I forced myself downward. One hand on the damp stone wall for balance, the other clutching a flashlight I had brought with me. The air grew warmer as I descended, and the tight corridor seemed to pulse, almost like breathing. The steps continued far longer than the size of the mansion should have allowed. Finally, the stairs opened into a cavernous chamber. The flashlight beam cut through thick air heavy with spores and dust. The room wasn't made of stone like the rest of the mansion. It was something older, something buried far beneath the foundation. Rough, organic walls curved unnaturally, as though I had stepped inside a giant rib cage carved from blackened bone. In the center of the chamber stood a stone altar. Upon it, another mirror, but this one was different from the one in my study. The glass was cracked in spiderweb fractures, the frame corroded and warped as though chewed by time itself. Strange markings, sigils I couldn't read, circled its surface, etched deep like scars. As I stepped closer, the humming in my head grew louder. Something flickered inside the mirror. Movement. I hesitated, heart pounding. The reflection showed not me, but Elena. She stood within the glass, wearing a white hospital gown stained with something dark, her bare feet standing on cold stone. She looked directly at me, though her eyes were hollow, like two glass marbles that reflected no light. Her lips moved, but no sound came through. I swallowed hard and stepped closer until my breath fogged the cracked surface. "Elena?" I whispered. Her voice finally came, not through my ears, but straight into my mind. "You found it." I staggered slightly, gripping the altar's edge to keep steady. "Elena, where are you?" Her head tilted, unnatural, as though her neck joints had been loosened. "I'm here, beneath it, beneath all of it." The walls pulsed softly around me as if responding to her words. "The house is not a house. It is a mouth," I trembled. "Pim, he knows, doesn't he?" She smiled, a sad, broken smile. "Pim keeps it fed." I turned in a slow circle, finally noticing details I had missed before. The walls weren't stone at all. They were covered in pale shapes, human forms, embedded into the surface like trapped insects in amber. Faces stretched in frozen terror, mouths open wide in silent screams. This was no basement. This was a pit, a tomb. Elena's voice invaded my mind again. "The rules aren't for protection. They're cages. You followed them. Now it knows your name." I stumbled backward, nearly dropping the flashlight. The humming surged into a high-pitched whine. The mirror's cracks spread rapidly, and the glass began to ripple like liquid. I backed away toward the stairs, my instincts screaming. "Elena, how do I get you out?" "You can't," she whispered, voice breaking. "You can only trade." The word trade echoed around the chamber as the entire room pulsed with rising heat. The embedded figures along the wall began to twitch, fingers curling, chests rising in shallow mockeries of breath. I bolted. Up the stairs, taking them two at a time, my lungs burned, heart jackhammering in my chest as I burst through the smaller door and slammed it shut behind me. The key slipped from my shaking hands, falling with a dull clang against the stone floor. The humming faded again, like a predator slinking back into the shadows. I didn't wait. I stumbled back through the forbidden room, past the chair, past the jars, past the restraints. Back into the safer, colder emptiness of Kilgore Court's main halls. The house creaked in mild irritation behind me, as though disappointed. Somewhere beyond the walls, I heard the gardener's heavy breaths once more, steady and patient, waiting. The house didn't punish me right away. That was almost worse. For 2 days after I descended into the forbidden chamber, life inside Kilgore Court returned to its perverse version of normalcy. The clocks continued ticking. The statues remained covered. The gardener lurked only in peripheral shadows, just as before. Pim said nothing, but the house was watching. I could feel it behind the walls, beneath the floorboards, pulsing faintly like a living thing digesting its meal. The mirror in the study was different now. Its surface no longer reflected at all. Where my face should have been was only a faint shimmer, like black oil swirling beneath glass. It was as if my reflection had been erased entirely. I avoided the study after that, but Pim noticed my unease. "You've been unsettled," he said one morning, watching me as I wound the grandfather clock with trembling hands. "Something feels different," I answered, unable to disguise the shake in my voice. "Like the house knows." Pim tilted his head slightly. "The house always knows." There was no mockery in his tone, only quiet certainty. I swallowed. "Pim, have you ever gone beneath?" He didn't answer at first. His gaze shifted toward the heavy curtains draped over the tall windows, where sunlight tried but failed to penetrate the suffocating air inside. Finally he spoke. "I've done what was necessary. As you will." I froze. Necessary for what? To maintain balance. He stepped closer then, lowering his voice to a near whisper. "The house isn't merely haunted, Sam. It's hungry. And hunger requires order." The words struck me like a slap. I wanted to scream at him, demand answers, but I could only manage a hoarse question. "Alina, she's down there." A long pause. She was never supposed to be involved. The admission made my legs nearly buckle. "You knew she was here all along," my voice cracked. "You let me believe I was going insane." Pim's eyes behind his mask didn't blink. "Would you have stayed if I told you the truth? You and I, Sam, we don't belong to the world outside anymore. We were always meant for here. We followed the rules. That's why we survive." I backed away from him. My fingers dug into the edges of the clock casing, desperate for something solid. "Elena didn't follow the rules." He nodded solemnly. "And so she was taken." I barely heard my own voice. "Taken? By what?" Pim's voice was almost reverent. "The Collector." The name settled into the room like poison. I could feel its weight pressing down on my chest. "The thing in the mirror," I whispered. "In the mirror, beneath the house, within the house. It's all the same." I shook my head. "No, I'm getting her out. I'm not leaving her here." Pim stepped even closer, now standing just a breath away. "To break the cycle is to feed it something greater, Sam. Do you understand? If you take her back, the house will demand another." My stomach twisted. The house would always demand balance, one in, one out. Elena for me. Pim didn't confirm it, but his silence was enough. The air around us grew heavier. The walls groaned softly, as if the house itself were listening to our conversation. Then, as if summoned, the doorbell rang. 3 perfect chimes. I stiffened. The deliveries. Pim's head turned sharply toward the front of the house. "We're late." My mind reeled. Late for what? He gestured toward the entryway, voice calm but firm. "For collection." I followed him, my legs moving without consent. The front door loomed ahead, larger than ever before. The same white box sat waiting on the stone steps outside, its surface damp from morning mist. The same stench leaked from its seams, rot and copper, sharp and nauseating. Pim handed me a pair of thick leather gloves. "Carry it to the maze," he instructed. I stared at the box. "What's inside?" He didn't answer. "Pim? What's in there?" His voice was quiet, as if speaking the words aloud might wake something, a failed replacement. My skin prickled, my throat closed. The weight of what I was doing finally crushed down on me. I wanted to refuse, to run, to destroy the box. But my hands were already slipping into the gloves, my body operating on some deeper, instinctual level. Obedience drilled into my bones since the first day I stepped into this place. Together, we carried the box out toward the maze. The carrion blooms swayed as we passed, their petals reaching toward us like hungry mouths, releasing their sweet, choking perfume. The center of the maze glowed faintly ahead, the stone pedestal waiting like an open grave. We set the box down. Pim checked his watch. 4 minutes, 52 seconds. Well done. The humming beneath my skin returned, like distant machinery waking up. We exited the maze without a word, the house slowly swallowing the package into its unseen gut. As we reached the mansion steps again, Pim paused and placed a firm hand on my shoulder. "One more day, Sam," he whispered. "One more day, and the house will release you." I didn't believe him. Neither did the house. That night, sleep finally came, but it was not rest. I found myself standing once again before the fractured mirror in the underground chamber, though I hadn't descended the forbidden stairs. Somehow, the house had pulled me back here. Whether in dreams or something worse, I couldn't tell. The walls around me breathed. The faces, embedded in their surface, twitched in tortured half-life, their eyes rolling, mouths opening and closing like drowning fish gasping for air. In the center, the mirror pulsed. Its cracks pulsed like open wounds, and from within the shattered reflection stepped Elena. She wore the same stained gown, her bare feet slick with something dark, but this time her eyes weren't hollow. They were filled with unbearable sadness. I tried to speak, but my throat closed, as if the house itself clenched around my voice. She stepped forward, her voice not coming from her mouth, but vibrating directly in my head. "They'll never let me go, Sam." Tears welled in my eyes, burning hot. I reached out to her, but my hand passed through the air, through her image as though she were smoke. "You broke the rule for me," she continued. "Now you belong here too." Behind her, something stirred in the dark glass, something massive shifting beneath the surface like a leviathan beneath black water, a shape that never fully formed but radiated cold, ancient hunger. The Collector. Its voice seeped into my mind, oily and sweet like poisoned honey. "You opened the door, Sam. Now you see. Now you understand." I tried to pull away, to wake, but my limbs refused to respond. "You were offered rules to protect you," the voice continued, "but you reached beyond them. You saw what was meant to stay buried. This house is not a house. It is a covenant." The shadows behind the glass pressed closer, and though I couldn't see its full form, I could feel its countless eyes studying me. "Your sister trespassed, but she is valuable." Elena stood silently, her head lowering in shame. "We can strike a balance," it whispered. "One life, one release." "No," I rasped, forcing my voice to work through gritted teeth. "I won't trade anyone else." "You already have." The house shifted beneath me. I staggered as the entire chamber convulsed, walls pulsing like muscle tissue. The faces embedded in the walls screamed in silence. Every delivery, every package. You carried their replacements into my mouth. Suddenly I saw their faces. Every box Pym had sent me to deliver into the maze. Every parcel I had obediently carried like some loyal servant. They weren't packages. They were people. Failed replacements. Failed offerings. The house had been consuming them all along. I collapsed to my knees, the weight of my guilt breaking me. "No," I whispered, choking. "I didn't know." The Collector's voice softened, almost tender. "You followed the rules. That was enough." It leaned closer through the glass, though still formless, a swirling mass of eyes and teeth and voices. "But this time you may choose." I looked up through the tears clouding my vision. "Your sister's soul may go free if you stay." The words felt like a knife twisting in my chest. "One stays, one leaves. The balance is satisfied." Behind the Collector's voice, Elena looked at me with trembling lips. Her face flickered with hope and terror all at once. "Sam, no," she whispered for the first time aloud. "Don't." But deep down, I already knew. This was never about rules. This was always about feeding, something that lived off desperate bargains. The Collector offered no mercy, only mathematics. One stays. As the house pulsed again, I forced my eyes to meet Elena's. "I'll do it," I whispered. Her face crumpled with horror. "Sam, no!" "You don't belong here." Tears streamed down my face. My throat burned. "I already do." The mirror pulsed. The Collector's hunger surged in satisfaction. "The exchange is accepted." The chamber brightened with a sickly white glow as the mirror fractured fully. The glass exploded outward, sending thousands of shards swirling like snowflakes in a frozen hurricane. And as Elena's image vanished, lifted free from the grasp of this cursed house, I collapsed forward into the abyss beneath my knees. Darkness swallowed me whole. When I woke, I was back in my quarters. The ticking of the grandfather clock filled the air like a steady heartbeat. But something was different. The house was still, quieter than ever before. Outside my window, the fog had lifted. The endless gray clouds had broken for the first time since I arrived, revealing pale blue sky. Pim stood by my bedside, his mask perfectly in place as always. "It's done," he said quietly. "The house is satisfied." I sat up slowly, my muscles stiff, my mind heavy. "Elena?" "She's gone," Pim answered. "Free." A strange peace filled my chest, but beneath it a cold, heavy stone of grief settled in my gut. Pim gestured toward the main hall. "It's much work to do, Sam. The house always requires a caretaker." I looked at him, and for the first time, I understood exactly who he was and who I had now become. I rose. Without another word, I followed him. Weeks passed, or perhaps months. Time moved differently inside Kilgore Court. The days bled into one another like wet ink on old parchment. The air never seemed to change, always heavy, always humming softly beneath my skin like a living heartbeat buried in the walls. The clocks chimed at their assigned intervals. The rules were maintained, and I, like Pim before me, had learned the rhythm of survival. I had become part of the house. Every morning, I wound the grandfather clock in the main hall. The same sequence, 7 turns precisely. The ticking kept the illusion intact, its hypnotic beat masking what lurked beneath. Every afternoon I checked the drapes over the statues, ensuring not a single corner of marble flesh peeked out. The faces behind the fabric shifted sometimes. Small details rearranged when I wasn't looking, but I never pulled the sheets back. That was not my role. Every evening, the bell rang. 3 chimes, always 3. Sometimes there was a box waiting, sometimes not. I carried each one to the maze in silence, always careful to complete the task under 5 minutes. The maze hummed as I entered it. The carrion blooms seemed to lean closer each time, as if recognizing me now, as if welcoming me. Their putrid sweetness no longer made me gag. I had grown used to the rot. This was the exchange I had made. Elena was free, I stayed, and the house had accepted the terms, but acceptance was not peace. I still heard her voice sometimes, faint and distant, like a half-remembered dream. Not the haunting voice that once lured me behind the walls. No, this was different. It was soft, like an echo of another life. "You don't belong there, Sam." The house always answered back, wrapping me in its heavy air like a cocoon, as if to remind me, "But you belong to me now." Pim rarely spoke anymore. He observed my routines, correcting me when necessary, but mostly stood in the background like a shadow cast from some long-forgotten candle. I understood him better now. He was not cruel. He was simply further along than I was. He had once made his bargain too. One evening, as I returned from the maze, I found Pim waiting in my quarters, a place he rarely entered. "You've done well," he said softly. I placed the empty gloves on the desk, my fingers stiff from the cold. "I've learned." He nodded, stepping closer. "Tomorrow I leave." I blinked. "Leave? Where?" He tilted his head, voice calm as always. "The house requires only one caretaker. My service has reached its end." His words hit me like a slow, creeping realization rather than a sharp shock. "You're free?" I asked, my throat tightening. Pim's eyes behind the mask softened. "No one leaves Kilgore Court, Sam. Not truly. But sometimes one is allowed to sleep." I swallowed hard. "And me?" He gestured to the wall where the framed list of rules still hung, perfectly preserved. "You continue." He reached into his coat pocket and produced a box. Inside lay a new mask. It was nearly identical to the one I wore. Plumage, curved beak, polished black eyes, but slightly different in its intricate design. Sharper lines, longer feathers. A subtle shift, as though it belonged to someone deeper within the house's hierarchy. Pim extended it toward me with both hands. "You are the caretaker now." My chest tightened as I stared down at the object. The mask seemed to pulse faintly in my hands, warm, almost alive. "You'll disappear, won't you?" I whispered. He didn't answer. He simply placed his gloved hand on my shoulder one last time. "Keep the house fed. Keep the rules intact, and the house will keep you alive." With that, Pim turned and exited the room. I never saw him again. That night, as I stood before the tall mirror in my quarters, I lifted the new mask to my face. The glass reflected not myself, but a silhouette, an outline blurred around the edges, like the shape of something unfinished, still being molded. The old mask sat quietly on the table behind me. The transition was complete. I inhaled deeply, the air behind the beak slightly warmer, more intimate now. The house hummed in approval, wrapping around me like a second skin. And then I heard it. The bell. 3 chimes. The first delivery since Pim's departure. I descended the grand staircase alone, the hollow click of my boots echoing through the vast, empty halls. The moon hung low through the stained glass windows, casting sickly pools of colored light onto the floor like scattered blood. At the front door, I paused. The box waited for me on the stone steps, white, sealed, silent. As I bent to lift it, my eyes caught something strange, a faint mark on the corner of the package, a series of numbers, a code, a date. The date of my arrival at Kilgore Court, the house whispered. "This one is for you." I carried the box toward the maze, but my legs moved differently this time, heavier, more aware of the weight of every step. The code on the corner of the package still burned in my mind. My arrival date, the day Kilgore Court had first claimed me. The carrion blooms swayed gently as I passed them, their thick petals brushing against my arms like eager, curious fingers. Their smell no longer repulsed me. I barely noticed it now. As I reached the center of the maze, the petals still waiting, bathed in moonlight. The moment I set the box down, something inside shifted. A sound. Not the usual faint shuffle of movement, but deliberate. Like breathing. Like something, or someone, moving inside the sealed container. I stepped back, watching. The humming beneath the earth surged as the box trembled, its edges twitching with each breath, as though whatever was inside was waking for the first time. My throat tightened. The collector wasn't finished. It never was. I turned sharply as a whisper filled the air, one that did not belong to the house. "Sam." I froze. It was Elena's voice, but not distant this time, not like before. I spun around, scanning the dense hedges surrounding me, the maze suddenly tighter, more claustrophobic. The night closed in, moonlight dimming unnaturally. "Sam, listen to me." Her voice floated just beyond the hedges, circling me like wind, pulling me in every direction. "Where are you?" I called out, my voice breaking. "It's not me, it's it." The words made my stomach twist. The house mimics, it learns, it wears voices like masks. The realization crashed into me all at once. This wasn't Elena. Not anymore. The collector had grown bolder. It had learned to reach even through my memories, wearing my sister's voice like a second skin. The box on the pedestal rattled harder now. The air thickened. "You can end this." The voice coaxed, softer now, gentler. "Break the clock. Unwind the heart." I staggered backward. The clock, the grandfather clock, its endless ticking was not simply routine, it was a binding force. Tim's words returned to me. The clocks create the veil. That veil was all that kept this house tethered between what it was and what it truly wanted to become. Without it, the house would show its real face. I turned away from the maze, running, no longer carrying the weight of hesitation. My boots pounded against the cobblestone paths. The house loomed larger with every step, windows flickering like blinking eyes. The front doors opened for me, as though expecting my return. I sprinted through the grand hallway toward the main clock. The sound of its gears grew louder as I approached, heavier than before. Its pendulum swayed unnaturally, faster, like a heartbeat climbing toward panic. I grabbed the winding key. For a moment, my hand hovered. Once I did this, there would be no undoing it. The house exhaled behind me, the walls flexing like lungs, eager to see if I would disobey one last time. And then, I twisted the key backwards. The gears shrieked. The hands on the clock spun wildly in reverse, blurring into a smear of metal and glass. The entire house convulsed around me as the heartbeat tempo shattered. The humming stopped, and then the silence broke. Every window in Kilgore Court exploded outward in a chorus of glass, the wind howling through the halls like a trapped animal finally released. The paintings along the walls melted, their faces running like wax, screaming silently as they dissolved. The house screamed with them. The marble statues in the grand hall lurched beneath their coverings, as though alive, their movements grotesque and broken. The mirror in the study shattered in a burst of liquid blackness, spilling something thick onto the floor that writhed before evaporating into thin air. I stumbled backward as the ground itself split. The floorboards buckled beneath my feet, exposing the breathing flesh beneath. The true skeleton of Kilgore Court, wet and pulsing, the collector emerged, not through the mirror this time, but through the foundation itself, an enormous roiling mass of tendrils, teeth, and eyes, formless yet purposeful. Its mouths whispered in 1,000 overlapping voices, each one mimicking someone I had known. Elena, Pim, even my own voice. You cannot undo the bargain. I collapsed to my knees as the house tore itself apart around me, yet somehow, I was still alive inside its collapsing body. The maze outside caught fire, its blooms shriveling into ash. The air grew hotter. The ceiling above me cracked like splitting bone, and then silence. The house was gone. I opened my eyes to morning light. I lay on a dirt path that wound through a quiet hill. No sign of Kilgore Court remained, only an empty field where the mansion had once stood. Wildflowers swayed gently in the breeze, the sky an impossible, innocent blue. It was as if the house had never existed, or perhaps had finally been buried for good. In my hand, I still clutched the winding key. I stared at it for a long time, unable to let go. Later, after many confused conversations with police and locals who claimed there had never been a mansion on this land, I found myself alone once again. No one believed my story. The address didn't exist. The records were empty. They always had been. But I knew better. Because every night at exactly 3:33 a.m., my old bedside clock, no matter where I moved, would chime 3 times. And behind its face, when the glass caught the moonlight just right, I could sometimes see eyes still watching, waiting. Thank you for joining us on this unsettling journey through Kilgore Court. Behind every door, every whisper, and every rule lies the darker question: what price are we truly willing to pay for safety? Stories like these remind us that sometimes the most terrifying horrors aren't just the monsters hiding in the shadows, but the bargains we make, and the ones we don't fully understand. If you enjoyed this chilling tale, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more terrifying stories, eerie mysteries, and twisted rules that you should never, ever break. And remember, some doors are meant to stay closed. Until next time, sleep tight.